Number 10, Roger Ebert predicts HDTV flat screens, on-demand video, and DVD in 1987. Omni magazine interviewed the famed movie critic and asked him about the future of television and movie competition. His reply was impressively accurate: "We will have high-definition, widescreen television sets and a push-button dialing system to order the movie you want at the time you want it. People will record films on 8mm and will play them back using Laserdisc, CD technology." Number 9, Aldous Huxley predicted antidepressants, 20 years before studies began on them. In his 1931 novel, Brave New World, Huxley describes a mind-altering drug the people of London take in 2540 to retain their sanity. Soma is described as having raised quite the impenetrable wall between the actual universe and their minds. It wasn't until the early 1950s that research into the reality of these sorts of drugs caught on. Number 8, French Marshal predicted the Second World War, just as the First one ended. French Marshal Ferdinand Foch played a major role in many of World War I's campaigns. When the war came to an end, he didn't believe it was truly the end, being quoted as saying, "This is not peace. It is an armistice for 20 years. It turns out he was almost exactly right, as the Second World War officially began 20 years and 68 days later. Number 7, Prince Vladimir Odoevsky essentially predicted social media in 1835. In his novel, Year 4338, the Russian novelist describes with impressive accuracy blogging, status updates, and even instant messaging. All this, at least a decade before the telegraph was brought to the public. Number 6, Frank Zappa proposes the rise of file sharing and music streaming services in 1989. In the Real Frank Zappa book, he lays out a plan detailing how to both deliver and charge for music in the digital medium, and very accurately lays out the cultural shift in music consumption that wouldn't occur for another decade. Even after the rise of Napster and iTunes, it took another decade for companies to figure out the exact sort of payment system he proposed. Number 5, U.S. Army Air Serviceman predicted the bombing of Pearl Harbor in 1925. General Billy Mitchell gained notoriety for the success of his flight programs against the Germans in World War I, after which he went on record predicting the future aerial attack. Attack will be launched as follows: bombardment, attack to be made on Ford Island, in Pearl Harbor, at 7:30 a.m. Attack to be made on Clark Field, Philippines, at 10:40 a.m. Number 4, M. Forrester wrote a short story predicting the Internet in 1909. Edward Morgan Forrester wrote, The Machine Stops, a short story in which people primarily communicate using digital screens, and the rarity of face-to-face interactions makes it increasingly awkward. Further, he described knowledge and ideas as being shared by a system that links every home. All this before radio was even a mass medium. Number 3, 2001: A Space Odyssey is written in 1968 and describes tablets and online newspapers. Arthur C. Clarke's 2001: A Space Odyssey describes the newspad, its interface, and its access to electronic newspapers from Earth in 2001. The description from 1968 is so spot on that it's been effectively used by Samsung to defend against patent lawsuits from Apple. Samsung claims that the concept for the device existed well before even Apple did. Number 2, H.G. Wells predicted tanks 13 years before the first tanks ever were deployed. In 1903, the famous author of War of the Worlds published a short story called The Land Ironclads. Wells essentially took the concept of naval ironclad ships and adapted them to land use as huge metal vehicles with 8 pairs of wheels, allowing a great range of motion. It wasn't until 1916, 13 years later, that the military first deployed the earliest tanks. Number 1, an anime predicted the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster. In 1999, Cowboy Bebop, a popular anime based in the future, aired episodes with a plot involving an antique spacecraft named Columbia, that looks a lot like current space shuttles, being used in a rescue mission. The mission almost fails because the heat-resistant tiles peeled off during the mission. Then, in 2003, the real space shuttle Columbia disintegrated after its heat-resistant tiles peeled off during launch.